Direct from our newsroom in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And in Washington, Eric Sevareid, Dan Rather, Bruce Morton, Nelson Benton, Bob Schieffer, Robert Shackney in Newark, New Jersey, and Jeff Williams in St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Good evening. President Nixon won a partial victory today in the Congressional Conference Committee dealing with his Phase 2 tax bill. The committee compromised on the tax checkoff provision for financing presidential election campaigns. The provision, to which the White House strongly objects, remains in the bill, but it will not take effect until after the '72 campaign. The compromise came even as the financially hard-pressed Democratic Party's leading contenders were agreeing to curb their own spending. Bruce Morton reports.
The Democratic contenders, Humphrey, Jackson, McGovern, and Muskie, met to sign a voluntary agreement limiting the money they'll spend on broadcast advertising and print and billboards in the primaries, limits which would sharply reduce spending from 1968 levels. But a few minutes before the signing, they learned that whoever wins the nomination has a money problem. The Senate-House conferees on the tax bill kept the provision for a $1 tax checkoff to finance the campaigns of presidential nominees, but deferred it until 1973. Leaving this year's Democratic winner with more debts than cash. One candidate, clearly shaken, said, "I don't think I'll eat lunch. It's probably time to fast." And Hubert Humphrey lashed at President Nixon's arguments against the checkoff.
That's a lot of hogwash.
Of course, I think the interest...
Just call it what it is. It's pure baloney, and he knows it, and I think the public knows it. These are strictly voluntary contributions, and it doesn't bail out one political party. It makes funds available for presidential candidates and political parties.
Would the White House accept a tax bill with the delayed checkoff? White House spokesman said President Nixon still opposes it, but hinted he might sign the tax bill anyway and try to kill the checkoff later on. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
What goes together like ham and eggs, hot biscuits, and honey? Coffee, with Coffee Mate non-dairy creamer, the full-bodied one. Coffee Mate gives coffee more body, more flavor, but still 11 calories in a level teaspoon. Try Coffee Mate, the full-bodied one. It gives coffee more body, more flavor. From Carnation.
Allstate says, watch this old car hit a wall at 5 miles an hour. Damage, just a few dollars. But watch the 1971 cars. At 5 miles an hour, average damage over $300. A new federal standard requires 1973 model cars to have better bumpers and is a fine step forward. Allstate wants bumpers that can take bumps again. Let's make driving a good thing again.
The White House conference on the aging ended today with a pledge from President Nixon to try to relieve the financial squeeze on the elderly. Dan Rather reports.
The president's address to older Americans comes in a campaign-style setting at a Washington hotel, less than 24 hours after returning from Chicago and an appeal to the youth vote. Mr. Nixon today promised more attention to problems of the aging, including reform of private and company pension plans, crackdowns on nursing home abuses, and spending more federal money on general help for older persons. He also served notice he may make lowering of property taxes an issue in his re-election campaign. He told the conference that property taxes are one of the largest unfair burdens older people must bear, that rapidly increasing property taxes are a problem for everyone, and that he will do something about it.
Property tax collections have increased by 40% in the last 5 years alone. We need a complete overhaul of our property taxes and of our whole system of financing public education, because the property tax, as you know, in California as well as in many other states, is the primary tax which can and must be used at this time for financing public education. Our revenue sharing proposals, which were made a year ago and which still have not been acted upon, can help relieve the pressure on property taxes, and older Americans have a large stake in enacting those proposals. But I believe we have to move on another front, more directly on the problem of property taxes. I am therefore working with our domestic counsel and working specifically with Secretary of the Treasury Connolly, preparing specific proposals to ease the crushing burden of property taxes for older Americans and for all Americans.
The president spoke of seeking possible federal legislation to ease property taxes, but gave no details. He also promised to reconsider his decision not to push for expansion of Medicaid to include prescription drugs. Dan Rather, CBS News, with the president at the National Conference on the Aging.
Earl Butz is President Nixon's new Secretary of Agriculture. The Senate confirmed him 51 to 44, and a few hours later, Mr. Nixon swore him in. Nelson Benton reports.
The ultimate confirmation of Butz was expected by senators on both sides, but the 7-vote margin was closer than most predicted. Even so, the vote was not like some close roll calls that evoke reactions of surprise from the gallery. At one point in the debate, Republican Aiken of Vermont, who managed the nomination on the floor, had some awkward pauses designating senators to speak for Butz. 4 Republicans voted against the administration: Cooper and Cook of Kentucky, something of a surprise, Young of North Dakota, and Miller of Iowa, farm state senators who opposed Butz from the start. All of the Senate Democrats who are probable candidates for president voted against. 4 hours after the vote, Butz was sworn in at the White House, the first time a cabinet member has taken office the same day he was confirmed.
I was reminded just before coming into this room that I announced the nomination of the new Secretary of Agriculture on Armistice Day.